The Chicago White Sox, notoriously most mid team in Major League Baseball heading into last season. They had a exactly 500 record over like 108 years. However, they broke it because they were 40 games under 500 last year. 61 and 101 was the record. It was not a pretty year for the White Sox. However, there's still some talent, but where's the direction of the team? Who really knows? However, we're going to break it down. We're going to try and figure this out heading into this 2024 season, into this Chicago White Sox team profile. My name is Derek. I'm here with Pat. You're watching Bleacher Brawls, and this is the Chicago White Sox team profile. First things first with the White Sox, let's just jump into it. Let's talk about their key players, because they do have some very good players on their team. So I'll hand it over to Pat first. Who are the key players for the team? 3 key players, and then the one who you think is going to have the biggest impact, or you just like the most?
Yeah, so I've poured over my notes. I've been working on this for weeks, Derek, and I've come to 2 players, and I'll let you speak on one of them, so I'll speak on one. I want to talk about Dylan Cease. I think partially because a lot of us are surprised that he's still going to be playing for the White Sox this year, although if you've listened to what any insider or even GM has said in Atlanta has said about Cease, they wanted the farm for him, and I think that that's a little ridiculous, especially because if you take a look at last year, he was a 97 ERA plus pitcher last year. He was below league average last year, and obviously he's not been like that through his career, right? We know who Dylan Cease can be. Finished second in the Cy Young voting the year before, but they want a lot for a guy who isn't really worth a lot. And I think that kind of gets to what I want to get to a little bit later in this video, which is they need to figure out who this team is going to be. It feels a little directionless, and with guys like Dylan Cease, and I'm going to let you talk about the superstar on this team, it kind of just feels like middling to me.
Well, it's just like I said, they're the definition of mid.
Yeah.
I get to talk about Lou Bob, but before Lou Bob, I do want to name some other players on this team that are, interesting. Andrew Vaughn had a very solid year last year, kind of under the radar, but not like a massive year, but, solid, I guess. For the White Sox, solid. You have, like, an Andrew Benintendi, who we love, but, didn't have a great year last year, but we still love him. But, yeah, I'll talk about Lou Bob. Luis Robert Jr., although I will always say Luis Robert normally, but I'd say Robert just so it's pronounced correctly here. Very solid year last year, 5F4, played 145 games, most games he's ever played in a season, which I think is, like, super important. He had 595 plate appearances as well, hit 38 homers. He also stole 20 bases. The strikeout rate, little concerning, ballooned back up to 29%. His rookie year, where he played 56 games in 2020, it was it was 32%. However, he dropped it to 20% the last 2 years, but this past year, it was back up to 29%. So not ideal, right? Not ideal at all. But I think if he can get the strikeout rate back down, I think you still are looking at a superstar. And you're looking at a guy who can be that superstar. He was also good defensively last year, 6 defensive runs saved in center field with 13 outs above average. So that he got a lot better defensively by defensive metrics last year. So you have the full package there. It's just, can with a team like the White Sox, it's kind of hard because like I said, they're kind of the definition of mid. But at the same time, like, if he were to be elsewhere in a bigger market, he'd be like a bigger market in terms of like a team that's not mid, like, teams that's competing. And that is like a New York, for example, right? Like, he'd be a massive, massive star. It's just, and also too, he's got to avoid the lack of effort things that did pop up a couple times. But if he does that, like, he is one of the better players in baseball. So I think he's a massive part of the White Sox. Whether they keep him, whether they end up trading him, who knows? Whether that be this year or next year, who knows, right? But Luis Robert, even Dylan Cease, they're both going to play massive roles in the future of the White Sox, whether they're there or they're not there. They're going to be the catalyst for this White Sox team. But moving on to guys who may or may not be moved at some point, let's talk about the moves that were actually made this offseason for the White Sox. And It's not a ton. They traded Aaron Bummer, which was a little bit for like it was Jared Schuster, and who personally I do want to shout out. He's from New Bedford, Massachusetts, where I grew up. So shout out Jared Schuster. It was Jared Schuster and I think 4 other players. They also signed Martin Maldonado. That's a fun one. They also traded Gregory Santos to the Mariners for Zach DeLoach and Prelander Baroa. Fun name. Do any of those moves stand out to you, or is it a move that they haven't made that stands out as, maybe you should have made this move, or maybe traded a Dylan Cease, maybe?
Yeah, of their, according to Baseball Reference, their top 6 players according to WAR last season, only 2 of them still remain on the team. That being Luis Robert and Dylan Cease, who they want to ship out anyway. So it definitely seems like they're just trying to shed right now, get what they can for. I mean, obviously some guys walked, but get what they can for who they have, and it's going to be a lot about just giving guys some playing time this year and opening up some spots so that guys can have that playing time.
Definitely. I think this is a team that's like they're in a weird spot because like they also don't have a great farm system. Like Colson Montgomery has been a massive find for them. He was a first round draft pick in 2021, but he was a kind of back end first round pick, but he's been stellar, and he's kind of worked himself into being one of the best shortstop prospects in baseball. And outside of him, like you have Noah Schultz, who's like solid, but he was the first round pick in 2022, and he only pitched in low A last year, and it was just 10 games, so like. He's still way too far away, realistically, to, have any bearing. And then after that, it's kind of like, there's not a ton in the farm system. There really isn't. It's mostly Colson Montgomery, and that's about it, honestly. And it's been that way for, like, the last 2 years. It's Colson Montgomery and who knows, right? But I think the big move for them is trading Gregory Santos, trading to Seattle. And Santos was very solid. Like, I think that's the thing. He was very underrated last year, and I think even the year before. But I know last year, definitely. He was pretty solid, 3.39 ERA. Not great in 2022, but last year, 3.39 ERA, 2.65 FIP, though, and a 3.32 SIERA. But they brought back a guy in Prelander Baroa, who I will talk about. They also brought back Zach DeLoach. But I like Baroa a lot. This is a guy I was looking at this past offseason when there were rumors maybe the Red Sox were talking to the Mariners. I'm like, can we snatch this reliever who's, like, looked really good last year in the minor leagues and got a little bit of big league time? Last year, Baroa pitched, like, solely in Double-A for the most part of the season, 65 innings there and 43 appearances. 36.6% K rate, 14% walk rate is a little scary, don't get me wrong, but a 2.89 ERA, a 2.88 FIP. Last year, he did make 2 appearances in the big leagues. The walk rate's a little scary, don't get me wrong. But the stuff is there, and, it's on Fangraphs, they have him graded 70 fastball, 60 slider, although the command's a 30. So, like, the command is rough, don't get me wrong, but the pure stuff is there to be a reliever. It's just, can he bring in the command a little bit? He gets the command in line a little bit. Like, there are a lot of relievers who walk a lot of guys, so I think he could be a guy that is a very interesting piece for a White Sox team, and I think there's a very solid chance he makes the team out of spring training. Very, very solid chance.
I also want to shout out Max Stassi, who one day was on the Los Angeles Angels, was then traded to Atlanta, which has got to be, it's got to be the greatest day of your life. Then literally the next day was traded to Chicago. So what an up and down sort of 48 hours he had, and to end up there, to think that maybe at that point you'll be the starter, and then they signed Martin Maldonado. It was that guy went through it this past offseason.
Yeah, and you got him. Oh, now you're gonna back up Martin Maldonado. Like, ooh, that's rough. Yeah. So speaking of the White Sox and the expectations for 2024, I think we're both on the same page. What are the expectations for the team? Because I think it's kind of hard to figure out the direction of this team. They had front office changes. Was it last offseason? And has anything really changed? Like, I have no clue. So I want to ask, like for me, my expectation, I literally wrote down to not suck with like 3 question marks. I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know. I have no clue where this team's going. You agree with that? Or like, it's like, I have no clue.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a slow process for them. I think that they're fine with it being a slow process, though. They've brought in guys that they think can do that eventually. You're right, the farm system's not there, but you got to think like let's use a team like the Orioles, for example. Okay, they had a bunch of big, prestigious minor league names, and then like Yennier Cano came out of nowhere for them this year. They had a bunch of they revived Aaron Hicks's career for a minute, and so I think that they're kind of trying to find some of those guys here and there. See who can fill some holes for them, give some guys some playing time. They're definitely not going full farm system. I think that they're going to try and find some diamonds in the rough. Win some more baseball games, try to not lose 100, and just, continue to improve, I think, is their goal right now. It's a division where they can win. I don't expect them to win the division, but it's arguably the weakest division in the sport. I think that they should be winning more games if they just kind of find just a couple guys here and there, which I think, it's hard to name those guys because I don't think we could have named them for Baltimore last year, but I definitely think that I do think that it's possible, as we've seen, and so I think that that's kind of what they're looking for. I suppose. I mean, I can't seem to come up with another theory.
I can't either. But I think it definitely is the weakest division of baseball, so you never know, right? But I think that's a good place to wrap it up. For Pat, my name is Derek. Thanks for tuning in to Bleacher Brawls. Check out all our links in the description. Check out all our other team profiles. And White Sox fans, let us know your thoughts on the team at Enter 2024 in the comments. Thanks for tuning in to Bleacher Brawls, and we will see you next time.